Hello, my beautiful co-creators. Lilou here. I'm in Glastonbury in England for the very last interview here before I head off to south of Wales on the Juicy Living tour. I'm having so awesome conversation, and I know you're enjoying these videos. We're gonna have another one that was absolutely unexpected with Brien. Is one of you were one of the speakers at the conference here this weekend. Yeah. How was that?
Excellent. We've had Michael Cremo, who's the forbidden archaeologist, and also Klaus Dona, who also studies artifacts that don't fit into the standard academic record talking, as well as Hugh Newman, myself, and others. It's very enlightening.
So you flew all the way here from Peru, where you live?
Yes, I was actually invited to Suffolk to another conference, and then to speak in London, and now I'm here for 9 days to cover the West Country of England. Yeah.
We're going to speak about the Mayans, the Incas, you research also, and you were here to speak of those long skulls that you have discovered, and that you had the honor and the privilege, I should say, to look at a little bit closer. And so there's we could have a lot of different conversations here, but I would love to start with the Mayans because this is, of course, a lot of people. We're a little bit, I must say, I feel between interviewing John Vallo, Melchizedek, and Carl Kalman, and other people, and the Mayans there is a lot of kind of different things that are being said. And you're a person that really looks at the oral tradition. So tell us, what are the pitfalls in all of this? What are your warnings, and what have you learned from them that you would like to share here?
Well, basically, I've been a student of native cultures since I was a child, and the one thing I've learned, especially now, is no one should speak for the native people except the native people themselves. And too many people have been speaking on behalf of the Maya and misrepresenting a lot of their stories, especially about the calendar. According to what I've heard from native sources, when the Mayan calendar ends on December 21st, 2012, it's the end of a dark age. It's not the end of the world. That's a misrepresentation of their oral teachings.
Yeah. And there's some other things that you would like to bring clarity to also?
Well, I think that's at least in terms of the Maya, that's the important thing. There are different factions of Mayan people, different people with different agendas, but I think the purity of the teaching of the old people is that when they talk of world, they're talking of an age or a cycle of time. This has been misrepresented by some people as being the world. So when they say the world ends, they're speaking of a cycle of time will end, and rather than being a time of destruction, that we're moving from a time of darkness into a time of light. So they are rejoicing the coming, whereas some authors have written books saying the world's ending, we're all going to die or something, and it's like, that's not what the Maya say, that I know of.
Yeah, and as you were saying, it's very poetic. So it's all, it's a figure of speech. It's not actually, should be not exactly understood as it's written.
Well, exactly. The thing about oral traditions that I know of is that they are not to be interpreted literally. They are poetry. So again, the example of the Maya is when they say the end of the world, they mean the end of an age. The world represents an age of time. But when it's taken in a linear context, it means the end of the world. Another example that I spoke to you about was about the Inca. When they say the Inca rose from Lake Titicaca and moved north to found the city of Cusco, again, it's poetry. What they mean is that the Inca came from the area of Lake Titicaca, but when oral tradition is spoken in a poetic way or written in a poetic way, it's much more beautiful a story, much richer fabric. And that's why they do it in that fashion rather than just straight facts and figures, because that's boring. So if it's a beautiful poetic story, then that there would be a tendency for it to be passed on more, because there'd be a greater interest from the students. And more interest when it's passed on again, to speak of it in an artistic way, not just in straight talk. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. So what do they really want to share in these times then? What do you feel is their message? What do they want to share their own stories or some of the knowledge so that we can grow and learn from them? And
Well, I think the important thing is that at this time of ecological mess, and the fact that the whole banking system is set, like all of the fiber or the fabric of society is unraveling, and that's because it is time for that to happen. We've done the capitalist thing and reached kind of the max point of the way that we've done it, and so I never speak for the native people because they speak for themselves, but in my conversations with them, there's a basic story, no matter where I go, that says the same thing, and that is that we are a human family. Some of them wish to tell of their history in order to teach us as a human family how to live with the earth, and that's the important thing. We should get into renewable energy, we should reduce our consumption, we should get away from all of these negative ways that we approach the planet, which is our mother, but also all of life, other people and other beings, because that is the way that they were taught as original instructions from the Creator, saying, you are part of the fabric of life. You are not dominant, you're not below, you're part of it. And that's something in the Western world that we've forgotten because of certain, famous books, that come, such as the Bible, which have been misinterpreted, rewritten, retranslated. So that's their basic stories, that their concern is actually for themselves, because they want their children to grow up in a beautiful world, but they know that we as human beings are all part of the same human family, and it's up to all of us to do something together, even if it's a little tiny thing. You can't say the government should, or institutions should, or they should. No, if you're alive, you should, you can do something to help.
Isn't there a fight amongst themselves as far as the teachings and then this and then that? Because sometimes that's what I felt when I interviewed the Opis, is that there was so much contradiction too, and there was so much separation within their own heritage that it's like, get it together and then teach us.
No, but the thing is that like in any human society, especially now in the 21st century, you have different people have different agendas. When money plays a role in any spiritual practice or any native anything, then the waters get very muddied. But from my experience, true native indigenous teachers are very quiet people of humility, so they don't like to be in front of the camera. They don't, have tour companies. They don't
play that game. They don't play that game.
No, because again, the knowledge they carry is not their knowledge. They carry it on behalf of their ancestors. That's an important thing to distinguish someone. A true wisdom keeper is that they are the keeper of the knowledge. It doesn't mean they own the knowledge, but they're the human carrier of traditions from the past that are to be handed to the descendants in the future. But at this point, the descendants are not solely the descendants of their clan or group. Many of them are reaching out or are allowing so-called outsiders to come and learn from them, because it's essential that we learn the lessons that they have to teach us for the benefit of all, not just for the benefit of self or for their benefit. It's for the benefit of all creation, that we all collectively get together and reverse certain negative trends on this planet.
You did a lot of research or found those skulls and looked at them. Can you tell us more about it and what you're finding and how this is unfolding, or how did you bump into it, and what are the characteristics of those skulls, and what does that tell us or tells you?
Okay, well, the thing is that it's just part of the research I've been doing in Peru, that wherever you find megalithic sites, which are these giant stone constructions, you also find these elongated human skulls. Whether you find them in museums or actually, or whether they're found locally in the area, there seems to be a connection between a possible subgroup of humanity or subspecies of humanity that lived in the distant past that had naturally elongated skulls with larger brains than ours. Some people call them descendants of the Anunnaki or aliens or alien hybrids. All of my work is based on factual evidence. Our DNA testing is only beginning now, and that will take a lot of time. But it's because you find them in many different parts of the world connected with megalithic sites that I think the ancient megalithic builders, especially places in Peru and Bolivia, were these people with elongated skulls. But again, in terms of dating, it's a very slow process, step by step. They're also thought to possibly be the red-haired giants that lived. That's more or less where I'm at with that. Yeah.
Where else is your research bringing you to? Because I guess once you start, I mean, one thing is leading to the next. You're living there in Peru. A lot of people dream to go there, and you're there on site. Those conversations, they're pieces of a big puzzle. Even those skulls, do they actually tell us something about our evolution, of where we're going at, of where we might have shut down something in us, our potential, and now we're recovering that? What is all that telling us?
Well, what it seems to be telling us that in the past, as in thousands of years ago, there were people who anatomically, especially in terms of their heads and therefore their minds and brains, were different than ours. They were always a very small pocket or small percentage of the population. And over time, they intermixed with so-called normal people. Gradually, the genetic blueprint that gave them these special qualities disappeared. Then there arose different cultures that manipulated the brains in order to, or skulls, in order to change the shape of them, and that seems to be an echo or reflection of these ancient ancestors, who were the true master builders, possibly what we call not the gods, but the gods with a small g, like these archetypal figures from the distant past, like the titans of Greece. The thing is, I'm actually able to find the concrete evidence, as in the skulls, and the little tiny bits of oral tradition that remain from that. That's why it's been a difficult journey for me, but because my heart's in it, I just continue pushing forward. And when people say I'm lucky with what I'm doing, it's been a lot of hard work, and like anything, eventually the hard work pays off, and that's why I've been invited to England to speak. You know, I've been paid to come in order to speak about this, which is great.
More and more people want to hear about this. We want to hear even more about it. Is it linked to Egypt by any chance? Because some people said that they had this skull, this long skull as well.
Well, that's true. That's during the Amarna period, as in when Tutankhamun and Akhenaten and Nefertiti lived. There are hints of that. The trouble is that I can't speak too much about that because I haven't been to Egypt, and everything that I base my work on is physical, hands-on. I can't read books or go through the internet and see pictures, because that can be very misleading. However, I am going in April of next year with Stephen Mailer, who is a major student of the ancient oral traditions of the Cometian people, who he says were the builders of the pyramids before the pharaohs ever showed up. That the pyramids are, and the Sphinx especially, is at least 12,000 years old, whereas the pharaonic people have been there for about 5,000 years. And that's another trend we're seeing, is that anywhere you go on the earth where there are very ancient societies, a lot of the stories that have been written by archaeologists and anthropologists are not wrong, but they're kind of misguided, because so many different peoples have lived in these places. And for example, in terms of Egypt, the pharaohs are the only ones written of, as if they appeared from nowhere, built everything, and then gradually disappeared. But it's being proven now that the pyramids and other structures existed long before the pharaohs showed up, and then when the pharaohs arrived about 5,000 years ago, they found these structures and simply inhabited them or used them and renamed them. For example, the Khufu pyramid, it could very well be that Khufu simply decided, since he was pharaoh, he saw this huge, beautiful triangular structure, and he said, I'm the king, that's mine. And so later that would be written down, the pyramid of Khufu. But Khufu didn't build it. And the same with the Sphinx. The work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who's a geologist, is fundamental because he's dated the Sphinx at being at least 3,000 years older than the pharaohs having been in Egypt. So we're looking backwards through history, and on an esoteric level, we're moving back towards trying to find actual evidence of what Atlantis, the so-called continent, but was probably a global society, what Atlantis really was. Because any oral traditions, such as the stories of Atlantis, have to have a grain of truth as a core. But again, they would have been refabricated, rewritten of, twisted, turned, and then certain societies, certain levels of society, through time would want to suppress that information. But we're living in a time of amazing openness where all this stuff is literally coming out of the sand in order to tell us who we really are as human beings and how long we've been here, so we can answer for ourselves the question, who are we, where do we come from, and where do we go?
Dr. Carmen Bolter, I've interviewed in Paris 3 days ago, was saying that for her the pyramids are 50,000 years.
Well, Dr. Carmen Bolter is a brilliant human being. I'm very lucky in that I do have contact with her through Facebook and emails. She's actually in England now, and I'm hoping to meet with her this week.
She's about an hour and a half from here.
Oh, well, her work, especially the series called The Pyramid Code, is brilliant, because she also, what she did, which was very intelligent from my viewpoint, is she included the oral traditions of a man called Hakim, who is no longer with us, but he was an oral tradition specialist, and he was one of the sources of information, shunned by academia, even though he's a certified or was a certified archaeologist, but he was the oral tradition, or one of the oral tradition carriers, who said these certain things, such as these buildings are much older than you say they are, and we know that because this comes from our tradition. So that's wonderful. Carmen Bolter, I very much look forward to meeting her. Yeah.
She's shaking it, could there be something, as those sites are interlinked? Are you finding proof that they're interlinked for something else, like a grid, or their powerhouses, or their amplifiers, or turning on something on the planet, or are they connected?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a book by a man called Christopher Dunn, who's an engineer. And I'm doing a tour with him in Peru in August, and he wrote a book called The Giza Power Plant. And I think he spent more than 20 years researching the subject as an engineer. And he is convinced that the Great Pyramid was a power plant in terms of it produced electricity. But the thing is that there was probably a cataclysm, as in when the end of the Ice Age happened about 12,000 years ago. It's possible that the axis of the Earth moved or went from possibly straight up to its present 23.5 degrees. That caused the entire electrical system of the planet to shift, and some of these buildings, such as the Great Pyramid, that did have a function of producing electricity, suddenly turned off. Then it became a somewhat dead structure. But it still has the residual energy, and that's why when people go into some of these temples that are so perfectly constructed, such as the Great Pyramid or other structures in Peru, they naturally go into an altered state of consciousness, because residual energy is there, and also the material that these buildings are made up of was very specific. Very often granite, which contains a lot of crystal quartz, and crystal is used in piezoelectric functions, or basalt, which is high in iron. So both of these have electromagnetic properties. So even though their original function no longer is there, that's also a reason why they would have been adopted as religious structures, because any priest or priestess or sensitive person walking in the surroundings of this would pick up on the fact that this, that there's still residual energy. So it goes from being a functional thing in terms of being a power plant to being a religious thing, and then that being abandoned when another culture moves in and takes over. So that's why some of these things are enigmas to all of us who live on Earth, because even as children we look at things like the Great Pyramid, and our parents or whoever can tell us, well, that's what that was a tomb. but there's something in our subconscious as a collective thing about humanity as we know. It's like, no, that's not it. When Christopher Dunn comes up with a logical explanation of how an ancient culture was able to produce an electrical machine like that, then that's how we're opening the doors of the past and seeing how brilliant the ancestors of humanity were, and the fact that we are not necessarily the greatest creations in all of history, but we're simply probably a pretty good example. But some of the ancestors may have been much more intelligent than we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a beautiful place to be. Well, thank you so much, Brien, for this moment and this information and being here casually right in the middle in the city center of the small town of Glastonbury in England. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Safe travels.
And all the best to you for all of your global adventures. You're doing great work.
Thank you. Thank you. Much love, my beautiful co-creators from Glastonbury. Bye.